Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, you are watching Off the Track, and it is time to drop the hammer.
Hey everyone, and welcome back to episode number 16 of Off the Track, here for another Wednesday show. I'm your host, Tanner Holmes, and to my left, I have my best friend and co-host, Bennett Gooch. Bennett, how have you been lately?
We're doing good. Second podcast episode of the trip, and we've just been making content, so we're just hanging out.
Absolutely, yeah. So Bennett came up earlier this week. You guys saw episode number 15 last week, and today we have a super fun, kind of relaxed, laid-back episode planned out for you. We are actually going to be telling the story of how we got involved with dirt track racing, and specifically how we got started, because I know we both have interesting stories.
Yeah, absolutely. I know my dad got me into it, and I think your dad got you into it as well, and they just both come from different backgrounds, and it'll be cool to talk about that.
Yeah, so we're going to be talking about every single detail of that story. Before we get into that, one of the main things to kind of mention here on the show is some of the additions to the studio. We told you guys that we were going to keep you updated every single time we add something. Mm-hmm. One of the things you guys saw in episode 15, but for anybody that missed it, the trophy that is now behind Bennett.
Yep, the Enduro Trophy at Mountain Valley Speedway. That was definitely a fun one, so I'm glad we got to add that to the studio, and we've got some other cool things added, like behind you.
Yes, so the second thing we have right behind to my right, one of my old suits, actually not super old. I believe it was from about 2018, so just a couple years ago, but that was like my first ever custom suit. And one of the, I guess, the quick funny things about that was we had this suit made, right? And I don't know if it was just a growing time, bad timing, whatever, but we measured it. I got it, and it fit fairly good from Simpson, but we ended up having to send it back because there was one small issue. And then I got to wear it for a couple months, but I just grew so fast that it was only good for a little period of time, and, already on to the next one. So definitely wanted to save that because that's kind of where our TH logo signature, which I'm going to try to continue throughout my whole career, on the front chest. So when I'm walking around, you see that logo, and I don't think really anyone else had that on their suit. So we kind of tried to do something different. And now a couple other drivers are following that trend. So love to have the TH on there. That was the second thing that we added to the studio. The third, go ahead.
A real quick mention, a funny thing about suits is, you're talking about that growing thing. I can't even order a suit that's like, from the website that's like maybe a large or something like that, because when you're 6'3", nothing fits right. And then, like you say, you order it custom fitted, and then you're either growing or it's off by a little bit, and that's something I struggle with. Yeah. So if you guys struggle with that, comment down below, because, when you're just oddly shaped, all legs and arms, it's a little weird.
Yeah, well, you're just at that period where, you can't go size by size because it just doesn't work.
Right.
So that was our second addition. The third, which you can't see in the camera frame, but it's all around the room. We ordered 60 feet of LED lights, right?
Yep.
LED lights. It was Bennett's idea, and I'm not going to lie, I was kind of skeptical just because, I don't know, in my room, I never had, any cool lights. It just wasn't against it. I just was like, oh, what's the point?
Yeah.
Well, Bennett decided to order some. They were cheap, and man, it's really, really cool.
Yeah.
It's bright. It's right around the top corner, and it goes all the way around the studio. We can change from multiple different colors, green, blue, red, white, whatever we want. And then also, there's other buttons that make them fade in and out or flash or anything like that. So that was addition number 3. The fourth one, something small, but we added, we're starting a little Hot Wheels collection. This was your idea.
Yeah, I like collecting Hot Wheels. I go through the store and I see Hot Wheels. I'm like, those are sick. I always do. And I've always had, at home, I have a bin full from when I was little and stuff. So I was like, you know what, why don't we just start? Because I always go to the store and see something cool, and I just grab one, and they're cheap. So every one I grab, we'll just start putting it on the shelf till we have a full shelf, and we got to do something.
Yeah, and we have this shelf, and it has so many different levels to it, so we kind of need to find something for each of them. So we figured that would kind of take up one of those levels. And then the last thing that we added is actually our 18T wing panel from the factory QRC number 18T for the 2021 Red Bluff Outlaw season. I guess it was from the end of 2020 when I flipped there in my heat race, and the right side panel came off, and when one of our guests, Kyler Shaw, came up from Northern California, he brought it with him, and it's just kind of been here in the studio. So that is actually about right up that direction, and it's kind of covering some of the LED lights for those to kind of glow behind it. So we are going to be keeping you guys updated as we add new things because it's just so cool. We literally want this studio to be packed full have the walls covered with different logos, suits, memorabilia, and maybe possibly we were talking, as we have different guests, if they have small pieces of history from their career, or, like a wing panel or something we could add to kind of just, really diverse this place.
Yeah, and we've got two things, actually. We got that we mentioned in a prior podcast, the sign that was made up there for us by Damien, and we also have the Steve Kinzer wing that we now have hung up, the front wing from Steve Kinzer. So it's pretty cool to see people bringing us stuff, and, putting it around here looks pretty good.
Yeah, and I think one thing to kind of mention that we didn't say a couple episodes ago with the banner that we hung up from Damien was my mom was giving us flack because we hung it up inside the studio, but she was saying we need to hang it up on the outside wall. So like when we walk in and guests walk in, that's where they get the welcome. So we might kind of change that around. But to kind of dive into today's episode, how we got started in dirt track racing, my story, I guess we'll just kind of get right into it. My story was unique in a way because I think one thing we could both say, well, yours is actually probably a little bit different, but my parents weren't racers. So the fact that I ended up being a dirt track racer at all is kind of crazy because the chances weren't very high.
We're both first-generation racers, actually.
Yes. So my dad never raced. My mom never raced. And so for me, it was more the fact of circumstances and just how it all kind of played out. I ended up behind the seat of a race car, and it all kind of took place in about 2008. So I was 5 years old at the time, and I made a whole YouTube video on it, but my story wasn't really straight. It was funny, after I made it, a couple people were like, no, this is kind of what happened, and so this is going to be the accurate version, I guess you could say, in the podcast, the long form. So it's 2008. I just kind of started playing a couple of sports like soccer and I think t-ball or baseball at the time. So the interest was there to be athletic, but I never thought about being a race car driver. I mean, for you, did you feel like, around 5 or 6 was when you kind of got that spark?
Yeah, that's 5 or 6. I started when I was 5, and I think at the time that was the only sport I was playing. I think maybe shortly after I got into cross country, but my only sport was racing, and that's all I really knew from my dad. Gotcha.
Yeah. So like for myself, it started in 2008, and I didn't really know a whole lot about what I wanted to do, but I do kind of remember, one thing that was always on the TV was NASCAR and like the Nationwide Series, or that's what it was called at the time. Crazy how time flies. Now it's the Xfinity Series, but the Nationwide Series and trucks a little bit. And, the Cup Series. And I think back then they had like the Car of Tomorrow and all this. It's just insane how time changes. But we got started, and my dad just always kind of had the NASCAR thing playing on the TV. And I think they had went to a couple of like dirt track races in the past. So my mom on her side, she talked a lot about being down from Monterey, California. She had went to Ocean a little bit, I think when she was younger, but not a lot, more like just like a fun thing to go and try out. Not as a fan really, just to go see what it's about. And so she had went to the races a little bit. My dad had went to Sonoma or Infineon. I think at the time he went, it was called Sears Point even.
Sears Point,
So he went down there and he watched the races a little bit. And so there was just like that fan kind of, being a little bit of a fan of the sport, but just, not really sure what's going on. Just to like go and do something and be at an event. So I did not come from a family of racers. That's kind of their background on it. But we got started, and actually my dad had a buddy that he was working with through his business, and there was a customer. Well, the customer happened to have a couple of outlaw karts, old outlaw karts, not like brand new. I don't even know if they were QR. I don't even think they were.
I think my first outlaw car was a SKE. I think.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
So it was old.
Mine might have been a homemade chassis. I mean, it was not anything too fancy. It was a very old outlaw kart. So anyway, this guy had this outlaw kart. And my dad's friend, whose name was Bob, I know he's going to be pumped I mentioned his name because I did it in that one video. He was the one that set this story straight. So my dad's friend, Bob, he was, the one that kind of convinced my dad, like, hey, you should get Tanner involved in racing. You should try it out. Like, this would be something fun for the family. And I think one of the things, too, was, like, if it doesn't work, we'll just sell the car. It's not a big deal. I don't think the car was very expensive or however we acquired it. We might have even, my dad might have even, like, traded a little bit of work with this customer for the car is what happened. Because I think when I first told the story, it was like it was on the side of the road, which in a way it was. But anyway, so we acquired this cart, and it was like an old QRC, and it had a purple top wing and orange body. It was not a very pretty looking cart. And I just remember it had an old Briggs & Stratton thing that you kind of like, you had the little machine to start it up and whatnot. And that's just how kart racing was back then. It wasn't, super fancy, kind of like to where it's at today, where, there is, I guess, more money involved in the sport, which is a good thing. But, it was just at a different spot. And here in Southern Oregon, it was actually more popular then than it was today. So got racing, and I remember we went to the Southern Oregon Speedway for the first time. Went out to the track just to watch, and we met a couple of people. We were walking through the pit area. I didn't know what I was getting into. Yeah. I actually always joke, and this is dead serious. I thought when I first got into kart racing that I was in a lower form of NASCAR. I'm 5 years old.
Yeah.
I legit think I was good. I was starting the truck series, or I thought we were gonna have pit lane. I did not know anything about dirt racing. I'd only watched asphalt. So anyway, go to my first race, and I remember we met these people called the Fosters, and that's not the same Fosters from down in California. Their name was actually, the driver's name was Bartley Foster, and I think the dad was Bart Foster, and somehow we met them, and I think it was because actually I gotten a bloody nose. It's weird. I was in the pit area. I had a bloody nose, and those were the people that helped us in the pits, and there was a couple of them in a group, so we became friends with them, talked with them, and they actually, said, hey, when you guys come to your first race, you can pit next to us, whatever. Yeah. So we ended up being friends with them the first couple of years in karting while we were racing there at the Southern Oregon Speedway. And I just remember my first race, obviously I was slow. We went there, and I didn't know what to expect, and I think my parents, the funniest part is, I wouldn't say they were getting mad at me, but they didn't get why I wasn't fast. They were typical box stock parents.
You see all these other kids that have kind of been doing it a little bit longer, and you're like, hey, why is my kid not doing that? Is there something wrong, And
I think that's where it's so relatable for parents, to kind of be that way. Why is my kid not fast? Why is he not stepping on the gas? And there's even some old videos that my mom has, because we've videoed everything. Yeah. Doesn't mean we necessarily have the footage, because it was on old camcorders, from the stands. And my mom wasn't even the videographer. It was her friend Beth, which is now actually married to Bob. So Bob and Beth are family friends. They got me into it. But Beth was the filmer, and she had to film because my mom literally couldn't. She would shake too bad. The camera, it's that. And so and camcorders were not as good back then, to where, maybe if you're shaking a little bit, the camera has stabilization or something to help you. So anyway, got started. I wasn't very quick. And I just remember the first night, one of the things I vividly, it was yesterday, was going into turn one. The Southern Oregon Speedway had no wall, which was a good thing. But I remember I flew off the track. I drove off into one, and instead of just driving, staying, I thought I had to stop. So I was NASCAR, I was spun out. So I just stopped there, and they threw the yellow, and they came out and got me, and they, keep going. Yeah. So that was the one thing I remember was wrecking, or you could say wrecking, and keeping going and finishing the main event. But I got lapped a couple of times. There was actually some pretty fast kids. But obviously, it took me a whole season to really get up to speed. Yeah. And I think I won my first race at the end of my first or second season. Yeah. But it was it was a weird non-points race or whatever at the end. So it took me a while, and it was just one of those things of trying to. It's a lot harder for a kid than you would think, especially when they have no background at all. I think if my dad was a racer and I was used to watching him, or, just being in that atmosphere, it's way different. I think I would have been way faster. But absolutely. I didn't have anyone to look up to, and I had parents that wanted to quit after a couple races because I was the slowest kid on the track. So it's just crazy where it kind of goes to. So after that first season, I got that win, and that was a confidence booster, because I remember some of the kids I was racing around, not even sure if they're going to listen to this podcast, but there was a SpongeBob car. Yeah. There was, another kid that was number 19. I think his name was Connor. So that was one of the other drivers. But it's just crazy, going from that, and also where the Southern Oregon Speedway was, because that's my local track. We're located here right outside of Medford. That's where, our shop is. That's where we live. I'm born and raised here. Mm-hmm. So that was kind of our home track. And at the time, that was the place to race on Friday nights. And then there was other tracks that they could run at on Saturday. So it's kind of unfortunate that kids don't have that same situation now, really, for getting into outlaw karts and whatnot. But then after we started running the Southern Oregon Speedway, and, all that happened of my dad and his friend Bob, getting the car and getting me out to the track for the first time. And those guys literally right there with me. Yeah. And I think another thing to note, because, and I know you'll have another take on this as well. Yeah. My first trailer, we had talked about this in a couple episodes ago. We had a snowmobile trailer. Yeah. So that was our first trailer that we took to the races. and there was no cabinets in it at all. No cabinets. There was just like some rubber on the ground for where the snowmobiles were supposed to be. So in my first couple of races, a lot of my friends came out to support me because it's like the thing, like, oh, my buddy's racing, but like no one ever actually thought like, this kid may be going to keep racing. It's just like, it'd be like me going to my buddy's football game. Like it's the same thing.
Yeah.
And a couple of my friends, and I remember we had so much food, snacks for everyone, coolers, whatever, but no cabinets. I don't think we had a lot of spare parts. It was just like, put air in your tires and go and just go out there and see what happens. If you hit something, you hit something. I don't think I tore up. Well, I did tear up a little bit because, hear what I have to say in a minute, but, we didn't have a lot of spare stuff and we just kind of went out there and raced. And one of the main things, as you can relate, my parents always buckled me in, obviously I didn't do my belts. I just remember like I had a little spine seat, we call them, just one of the little, maybe
I had the same thing,
maybe Kirky brand or something, but you have one of those and, I didn't have like a Hans. I had like some sort of head and neck restraint, but it went all the way down my back and it kind of came up between my legs. And it was like a second crotch belt that that's how it latched in. So
that's fancy. I just had a donut.
Yeah. Well, so it was weird. So my head and neck restraint also had a donut with it. It was weird. So, so I had my donut on, which not a lot of people run anymore, which is a good thing because, they're not as safe as the current Hans or hybrid that we now have today and they offer. But anyway, and those plugged right into my helmet, and my dad would always, strap me in and do my visor and do everything and my chin strap and stuff. So I just remember, man, those were kind of the days of getting started, and it's just so funny to see how my parents, were the box stock mom, were the box stock dad, thinking their kid was going to be so good. But I guess to kind of end my story of getting started, that first race, the second race was pretty similar. I do actually remember in my second race, there was a kid that I'm still friends with today. His name's Gabe Nelson, and he had a car, and he was running, I think, second or third in the A main event, or maybe, I don't know, at some point we were passing him, and I was actually running up front because I ran in the back on my first race, but my second race, I was up front because I think I just had a good pill, and I just ended up not being too bad, but I couldn't pass this one car. So I'm riding around slow behind this one car, and everyone is just past. But it's just like the typical starting move. So I just couldn't get past this one kid, and so that was kind of my second race. And then my third race, I ended up flipping 9 times. So that's my story of getting started and how I flipped 9 times. Was I actually just got a little high off of turn 4 at Southern Oregon because that was the place we were racing.
Yeah,
and this other kid was coming on the track. So he thought that when he spun out, he would have to, go off the track. Like I'm talking at Southern Oregon, here's like the wall. You go off this way and you come on over here. So it's like a complete circle. So he drove all the way off the track and they still let him on the track. He went all the way through staging after he wrecked.
Yeah.
And, he was a beginner as well.
Right.
He drove on the track. Well, I had got too high, and I actually have some footage of it that I played in a video before, but they barely caught it because my mom, I think, dropped the camera, but, just
plugged him?
KO'd the wall and then KO'd him, and we both wrecked. So I flipped 9 times, and that was kind of my introduction to dirt track racing. So what a fun turn of events. And then after that, we became racers, and my parents kind of learned how to handle it and kind of be a coach in a way, even though they had never raced. And you just talk to people, you make friends, lifelong friends, and you're hooked. That's just how it goes.
Yeah, mine's a little bit different, kind of the same. So my parents never raced, but my dad was a huge race fan. So like same thing, watching all the races on TV and whatnot. And he had some buddies that raced. I think he was talking about racing with a close friend of his, and they had like a van that you would race on a road course, I think at Willows or something, and he rode with him or something like that. So that's about all the racing experience he had. And then he got the opportunity when he was in Vegas for the NFR. He was at an event, or he was out at the shop when Michael Gahn owned the truck team for Brennan, the Orleans racing team, and Steve Park drove and all that stuff. We might have to get him on the podcast, talk about how he fell into this position.
Yeah.
But anyways, he got an opportunity to go pit on the truck team. So he went and pitted on a truck team for a couple races. And so that's about all the racing experience he had. And then when I was 5, he got out of pitting with them because he wanted me to start racing. And so I really never, I don't think I ever told him like, hey, I want to go race. it was just something we watched and stuff like that. So all I knew was going to horse shows on the weekends with my mom, and then riding rodeo, just being down there messing around as a little kid, and a short career of riding a sheep one time in a show, and that was it because I was over it. And so he got out, and we went down to Red Bluff. I do remember this. We went down to Red Bluff as me, him, and my mom after a horse show, I believe, and we watched the Red Bluff Outlaws. And he was like, do you want to do that? And I was like, heck yeah, let's do it. So a couple weeks later, my dad shows up at home with a cart in the back of his truck. And I know he always says this. My mom was pissed. She wasn't happy about it at all. So I think that might be a little bit different. Your mom wanted you to go race.
My mom, in a way.
Yeah.
I think my mom was like worried. It's tough because like I could totally see as a parent, you know, like your kid's going to be behind the wheel of a vehicle. And like most 5-year-olds, probably, especially when there's no known of racing at all, because like, you know, we have to learn what the flags mean, you know, when to slow down, everything. Not to just go wide open into other kids because it's funny. You know? Yeah.
So she was not happy about it, but we got this car all together and everything, and I don't even know what chassis it was. I think we still have it back at the house. So the thing is sitting in the race car graveyard, as we call it, out behind the shop, the factory SBR shop. So we got that thing all tuned up. Him and my grandpa and I think my uncle helped out with that. And I remember going into my first race. It's kind of hard to look back on because I don't remember it too well.
But it was at Red Bluff,
It was at Red Bluff.
That's a heck of a place to start.
That's what I say. I got thrown to the wolves my very first time. We went to Red Bluff to race, and I remember the kids I was racing with, they all pretty much had like racing backgrounds, like Brian Hubert, his dad, his uncle, you know, all those people. They've had a bunch of racing background, and my dad just pitted on a truck team, and he thought, you know, I can put my kid in here and he'll know what to do. So that's what we did. And we showed up in a horse trailer, like I mentioned before, nothing too fancy at all. And I do remember as a kid, when I would go to the track getting into it, I would bring toys. And like, I don't know if you remember this, but like, the die cast we have here, I would build tracks and crap right next to our trailer and build like outlaw, or just, you know, just play, and I wouldn't even focus on the race. I was there to
as a kid, we were there to hang out, race, and then play with our buddies after.
Oh, 100%. Like that's what I remember. I would get out of the car and, you know, I'd go find like Blake, my close friend, Cameron Davis at the time. We pitted next to him. We would just mess around and have fun. And so I definitely think like, you know, why would I do that? But it's you're a kid, and you know, growing up there watching the kids now do the same thing we did. Yeah, we would literally run around the dang trees. Like all the kids would run around the trees. We would race each other on foot and stuff like that. So I remember my first races. That's what we that's pretty much what we did. Like I just got in the car and drove, and I didn't think anything. I didn't have a racing mentality. I didn't know what I was doing. You know what I mean? I just got this thing, and you know, a couple, you know, maybe a year or two, or seasons, I guess you could say, after Red Bluff, I started to get more like, obviously, you know, we're here to race, we're here to win and all this. And one thing I remember as a kid racing, getting into it, is school, and school being one of the things I hated most while I was racing, because my teachers always asked, well, what do you want to be someday? And I was like, well, I want to be a race car driver. That's what I'm doing now. That's what I'm going to do. And they're like, no, you can't do that. And so I'd get pissed at them, and we'd have show and tell days, and I'm bringing trophies, and all these kids are like, what is this? And they're all like, oh, yeah, you race. Okay. Like, you know what I mean? I'm like, you guys wouldn't even understand what it is.
You'll actually like this. So I have the exact same story. So I had a show and tell day, and I was in kindergarten. That's kind of when, I guess that's the same thing with me. Yeah. So I was in kindergarten, and it was my turn to do show and tell. And I brought all my gear. I didn't bring trophies because I don't think I really had any trophies at the time. Yeah. But I'm dead serious. I dressed up, gloves. I have arm restraints just dangling around almost to my feet, probably, because, you know, you're so small. I had my arm restraints. I had my helmet. And I remember just like my mom and dad carrying it in with me to, like, you know, put in my spot to show everyone. Yeah. And just, man, it feels like yesterday almost that was that. But yeah, it's just funny. Like I think a lot of racers that at least if you started at a young age, and that's kind of part of what you did, you wanted to tell everyone about it. And to me, it was always about like, kind of saying you're a NASCAR driver, you're a professional driver, just at like 5 years old.
Yeah. And that's one of the things too, is this is something I look back on. I'm like, this is the dumbest thing ever, because I had an actual buddy, same age as me in kindergarten. His name is Shad, and he raced dirt bikes, right? So we're the only ones that have an idea of auto racing, dirt bikes, outlaw karts, and he would bring trophies too, and I would bring trophies. And it was always this war of like, whose sport is more dangerous. But if you look back at it, it's like, that's so dumb. Why do you care? Do you really want to be known as being more? So, and so I remember going through school, all the kids were like, oh, it's racing. And obviously as you get older, it becomes more cool or impressive, I guess you could say, is, oh, I'm a race car driver. And so I think I just remember, showing up and racing, and my dad really got into it, and I got into it, and my mom, and we were dedicated. Red Bluff, every year we would show up for the whole year and hit every race possible. And that's pretty much where we grew up. And I do know at one point my dad got into an open, and I remember we had the same paint scheme, same cars. He raced it once, and that was it, because we had a Kawasaki, a KX500. And for people that don't know, KX either run really good or they blow up, and
pretty
they don't.
much.
Yeah. So that's what happened. He ran a heat race, and he's a bigger guy, and he just. And, we didn't have the best karts. And obviously, the frame he had was way outdated.
Yeah. Well, you probably didn't even really know a whole lot of what he was doing, too.
Right.
He's just
having fun. And that's what he did. And he decided, we're going to get out of it, because it was too hard for him to, run the beginner box and then get into open and then set my car up and then get into it. So that's about as long as that lasted. And then ever since then, just that's where we met. And I think looking back at it, I don't know, racing-wise, I think that's all I really cared about. Once I learned what I was doing, all their school sports and stuff, I did cross country, you did baseball, I did baseball, I did basketball. Those were fun, and I enjoyed them. I just remember thinking oh, but it's racing so much.
Yeah, I think it was almost because it was different in a way. It was something different that not a lot of people did. And I had a couple things I wanted to bring up and kind of get your thoughts. So first off, do you remember kind of what some of the equipment you used when you first got started? Because myself, so my parents were worried, but they were willing to try the sport.
Yeah.
So I had a brand new helmet because they were scared, and they made sure I had my neck restraint. And then also I remember we did have one of these $99 fire suits. I think I still have it, and they made sure to get embroidered Tanner H, I think, was on it. So that was my first set of gear, and then just the generic gloves and.
I had, like you said, the $99 suit.
Yeah.
I had this helmet we got with the cart, and I remember I was in a race, and I hit head on into the wall, and I hit so hard the dang visor came up, and it was so loose on me. I told my dad, I said, I'm not doing this. Give me a dang helmet. This thing sucks. The freaking visor almost snapped off from an impact. So I had that. I had this neck roll that I used for the longest time till I got a Hans. And then I had the spine seat, and, looking back at it, it's asking, I'm thinking to my parents, why would you put your kid in that? Because I'm not a dad right now, and I don't plan to be one anytime soon, but I look at the kids and the safety equipment now, and I know for sure, a good example, Owen Larson, Brody, literally all the kids now, they're running the best safety equipment. And I think that should be a standard, because I do see some people that show up to the track with their kid for the first time, and they don't have the best safety equipment. I think nowadays there's really no excuse to say, we can't run this, because I think at a kid that young age and how fast the karts are getting,
it's important. You
definitely should have a full containment suit or a suit, a helmet, a Hans, or whatever it is at the time. Maybe you could get away with a donut at, a beginner box. But I think looking back, I'm how did my parents just put me in that stuff? You know what I mean?
It's tough too, 'cause especially some of these parents, maybe they don't have all the funds because they're putting so much into the racing, and it's one of those things. I think no matter what, try not to sacrifice that,
safety,
because that's exactly what needs to
100%.
Have everything into it.
Yeah.
And I think another thing to kind of bring up, I was going to ask. I have two topics. The first one being, when you first started, how did, obviously your dad's the one setting it up. My dad was the one setting it up, or some of his buddies, and you try to, they're asking for help. But, not coming from racing, my dad had no idea what he was doing. No idea, just try to put air in the tires. But like as you try to get a little bit faster, you know, they're obviously going to want to try to do the right things to the race car. And I think, you know, for a lot of dads nowadays that don't have a racing background, that's the hardest part. It's like, what do I do?
Yeah.
And so I know my dad actually read a lot of books. Like my dad ordered some books about going fast, and none really on an outlaw kart because those aren't necessarily out there, but like the basic like flat kart, like fast asphalt, dirt, like what to do to make the car do this and that. Like, did you guys do the same thing?
I think my dad did the same exact thing. I think he also tried to apply a lot of asphalt stuff to dirt, and he learned real quick that you can't do that, just because that's what he do as a fan of NASCAR, being on the truck team, thinking like, you know, I can apply this to this, when really an outlaw kart, nothing. You can't even apply really much sprint car stuff to an outlaw car. It's very limited. And so that's what he did. He did read up a lot about that. And a quick mention there is trying new things. I remember I was younger. We had all my family come for West Coast Nationals, and I think I was either lining up for the slow dash, fast dash, or the A main. Is one of the three things at West Coast Nationals. And they did the national anthem, and they fired me up. And I don't know what they were doing. They were experimenting something. The damn piston went through the roof of my motor next to me, and I heard it hit the wing, and I was like, "What the heck was that?" And so we roll it out, and there's a hole in my block, and I'm like, "What?" And as a kid, you're like, "Oh, that sucks." But thinking back, I'm like, "What did they try to do?" Because I was like, something was not legal if you're having holes blown through your block. So I was like, you know, they're just trying stuff, and I feel like back in the day, that's what you kind of had to do.
Yeah, especially like the motor packages, you know, a lot of our stuff was just like the Briggs. And so you could really, I mean, I'm pretty sure some of the kids I was racing with had some pretty cheated up stuff.
Oh, and everyone did. It's like, it's just you can't really sugarcoat it. I mean, that's just what you did.
That's just what they were going for. And like actually looking back as well, like I'm so thankful that my dad did put the time and the effort in, because I think about it, you know, at the time you don't notice. You're 7, 8 years old. But like I would walk into my dad's room, and he would spend hours reading these books about how to make a car go fast. And like that was really the beginning of, you know, I mean, obviously the whole time he put effort in, but like, I mean, that was just over the top. Like half the reason why we, you know, maybe progressed in certain ways, like in beginner, you know, we did start winning some races, or box stock, we started winning races because my dad did ask questions, but also, you know, wasn't afraid to try to gain that knowledge and learn how to set up the cars, you know, on his own, kind of coming from scratch.
And that's something I got to give props to my dad too, because I know for the longest time, and I'll admit it, I don't think until 250s, you know, end of my 250 career to open career, that I gave a crap about setup, because I always put it on him. I'm like, this is what the car's wrong. This is what I need you to do. And then I started to realize this is more of a team sport. And so I told my dad, I was like, okay, you know, let me help. You know, I want to wash the car. I want to help set it up. I want to learn the ins and outs of the chassis. And I think that's why now in an outlaw car, I'm confident in setting up someone's stuff and helping them. And he knows now a lot. And I could tell him exactly what I need now, and he knows what to do. And I think one of the biggest things he ever learned at the Red Bluff Outlaws, and I learned as well, is what's going to work for you isn't going to work for me.
Yeah.
And a lot of people think there's a magic number in setting up outlaw karts, and that's not the case. It's really, you know, what's going to fit your driving style, and how can you get the car around the track the smoothest and straightest.
Yeah, it's got to, in anything, like the driver's got to be comfortable. And I think sometimes a lot of people do fall into that trap of like, you know, this setup works for this guy. Why does it not work for you? And why does it not work for me? Well, we just all ultimately drive the car differently.
Yeah.
And, you know, my dad and I kind of had that similar relationship. And in another person, I do got to give a shout out. We were actually just at his shop because you were getting a couple things.
Yeah.
But Rick Rapp. So Rick, here from Southern Oregon, he has a parts shop, and he actually used to drive down to the Red Bluff Outlaws a lot during my early career before I was fortunate enough to earn my QRC ride. But he was another guy that helped a ton with like setting up and giving my dad some of that knowledge, because he had a background in not only dirt racing, but asphalt. So like he just knew a lot of stuff. He was involved. Yep. So between him and then, like I said earlier, Bob Nelson is his name. He was a huge part of me getting started. And then my dad and my family for just supporting me and not giving up on me, and you know, not quitting, because actually a funny story that I have to tell, because I don't think I said this in my video. But when I was going slow in the early stages, you had Bob, you had my dad, and they would always sit on the fence. And my dad was getting so frustrated, getting so mad, you know, like I said, doing the arm signals, doing everything. And my dad was going to just like chew me out when he got back. Cause I think it was a heat race or hot laps. Like I wasn't on the gas.
Yeah.
And And so Bob, Bob was a good mediator, I guess you could say. He was trying to encourage my dad, like, of course he's not fast. Like, this is crazy. This is racing. Like, he doesn't know what's going on. And he said, John, before you rip him a new one, at least try to tell him one thing he does good every single time. Like, try to encourage him before you really try to, change something. And my dad would tell him, what if he didn't do anything good? He's not doing anything good, So it's just funny how, the things change. And now, our parents look at, other parents getting started and like, oh, they're so crazy. But, we were in those shoes at one point.
Yeah, I definitely got to say a big thanks to my dad, mom, and my grandparents were at every race. Like, they showed up to every single race, and we would go to my grandparents' house when they used to live next to us, and we'd scale at their shop, and then the next day would be Saturday, and we'd go down as a family, and they made it to every single race. So a big shout out to my grandparents as well for helping, and my grandpa always, was there to help. And when things got a little physical, he was always there to back up my dad. So that's just a funny thing too. A quick mention, we're racing beginner boxes, right? And my dad's a hothead. Well, I wouldn't say he's a hothead, but he
has a trigger point.
There's a trigger point. All right. So, we may have been in a few, dust ups in Red Bluff or whatnot.
That Red Bluff's that place,
and that's what it is. And so my grandpa always backed him up and was always down there. And my dad, we would get so, like, they would be getting in arguments or maybe a fight afterwards here and there at Red Bluff after a beginner box heat race. I remember that. And I was like, thinking back, you're like, yeah, it was a big deal. But looking back at it now, I was like, that's so dumb. Like, they're kids. Probably the contact was so unintentional.
Especially if it's not for, like, okay, I get it maybe if the beginner kids are, like, at the point where they're advanced, where they're 7 or 8, you know, and they're kind of starting to understand
And there is those kids.
And there are the kids that are good, and, like, maybe you're battling for wins and championships. Right. I get, at that point, the kids understand it enough to where, like, they know what's going on. Yeah. But especially when it's, like, the kids that are, like, running 5th or 6th in a heat race, and they're just starting, and the parents are, like, literally so about to just like throw down in the hot pit.
And I'm not going to criticize anyone because we were there, but I'm going to say nowadays, like, just there's a time and place, and you just gotta,
especially
you
it's kids. It's kids. And I think that's a good segue into just one quick topic to bring up. Like, just when you really think about, like, I don't know, sometimes I break things down and I kind of like, just the concept of racing, but also the fact that, nowadays, especially some kids are getting started at 3 and 4 years old. Like, when you think at really like where these kids are at 3, 4, even 5 and getting into 6, like how, you see, what a 5 or 6 year old looks like, how young they are. Yeah. And you think of putting them in these machines where they're actually going 30, 40 miles an hour, like you're putting them in a pretty big spot. Yeah. Obviously, stuff can happen. And especially when, at that stage, you don't know what's going on. You really don't. And then also to think about just like where, as you transition, like how you gain these skills in racing and, you start out not knowing anything. And, I think part of it is because you don't have that mentality of racing. You're not thinking about going fast. You're not thinking about winning. You don't get it. But like, as you start to get it, just like how you kind of change in the sport and the lessons you learn and the memories you make, it's kind of just such a cool concept. And I think, obviously a lot of people want to have that chance of racing. And unfortunately, there's a lot of kids and stuff that don't get the opportunity. We were in good spots. Like I said, the fact that I ended up being a race car driver and had the chance, I don't know. Cause I could have been in multiple other things, not coming from a racing family, but just the chance and what racing is to me when I think about it, it's really, really insane.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you look at so I'm pretty confident when I say if I put myself in the equipment I had versus like someone like Brody Reynolds, a standout in the beginner box class, they would run circles around us because they've got great equipment now. Like the technology has advanced so much, which I think is really, really unique as well, and why these kids are advancing so much and being so fast. But it's also funny to think, like, I'm so confident I would put money on, maybe Owen Larson, Brody Reynolds, Bentley Nelson. They could go whoop all of my friends that are my age butts at, like, indoor karting. Yeah. It's like those kids now, like, they're so developed, and it's crazy to watch how young people are winning. Like Ty Gibbs, he just won his first Xfinity Series race. At how old is he? Like,
I think he's not even 20. I think he's 18. Yeah,
18. And it's like I always look back and I was like, okay, I want to be in NASCAR by when I'm 18, and then I got you
start
get hit with the
realizing,
realization
yeah.
like, okay, it doesn't work like that. But like these kids are in super late models so young, and these like
Even
junior late
sprint
models,
cars.
sprint cars, right?
12, 13, 14. I mean, you can run a limited at 14.
Depending where you're at,
I know
yeah.
that there's definitely some kids that are trying to stretch it and run at 12,
Yeah.
run at 13, even younger. And yeah, I think that's such a valuable point. Not even just in outlaw karts. I'm not really familiar with the micro ranks, but I know that there's a lot of kids starting young too,
Yeah.
because you have junior sprints and then right into restricted, where in outlaw karts, you have beginner, or, you even go below that. They have like Predator motors that they throw on there when the kids are 3 or 4 years old. So it's going to be really cool to see over the next like 20 years. And even as technology advances, but like these kids getting started, not only at so young, but how many races you could run. See, when I started, I was running maybe a 9-race summer schedule.
12.
Southern Oregon had 9, 12
Yeah.
races. Yeah, Red
Red
Bluff
Bluff had 12.
12, 13 points races with nationals. You start to look at that, and now it's like the opportunity is you can run all of Red Bluff.
Yeah.
You can run probably a handful of shows at Lakeport, which is a little bit south, and there's
Yeah.
other tracks. So you can run maybe 15 to 20 shows in the wintertime, and then Cycleland is a 20-race schedule, if not a little bit more.
Yeah.
So you can run 40 races at the age of 5 or 6 years old. Like
Yeah.
it's mind-blowing versus, what we had maybe 10 years ago. So the talent is only going to increase, and you threw out some names, Owen Larson, Kyle's son. He was incredible at 5 years old at Red Bluff. Brody Reynolds is a kid that's coming up. Corbin C., he just moved into 250s. He's a little older. He's one of my buddies. And there's just the list of names in beginner and box stock is just incredible.
Also, once again, we can utilize this tool. When you were that age, I had diecast on the carpet. That's how I learned racing and played racing. Nowadays, these kids less than 5 years old can get on their dad's simulator rig and play iRacing. And like right there, if the kid starts to learn, like you can learn so much on iRacing as a kid. And I think once they realize it's not a game and it's a tool,
Or it can be
and
used as
and
a
a lot
tool.
of them do use it as a tool. I mean, it is a game, but a lot of them do use it as a tool. It just develops them so quick.
Well, and even the great Dale Jr. has said that exact thing. If you throw a kid on a simulator at a young age and he starts to learn things, they're going to turn out to be really good. And I agree, because just the basics happen faster. You learn what green flag means. You learn what yellow means. You learn what white, checkered. You also learn what dirty racing is and black flag, and what tearing up your equipment looks like if you flip. Yes, it's a game, but a simulator.
Yeah.
But that's just how it rolls. So yeah, the tools are increasing and the chance is increasing, and for more seat time. So yeah, the next 15 to 20 years, I think we're going to see some pretty stout kids that are just getting started or have started within the last 5 years.
It's going to be fun to watch, and we're going to have to watch our backs because they're going to develop pretty quickly.
So now to wrap up today's episode of Off the Track, here on my phone, I actually have a couple of fan questions that you guys sent in relating to the topic of getting started, and they wanted to hear our thoughts. Possibly we could help them out. So the first one being, if you were getting started today as a racer, but you have all the knowledge that you now have, but you're getting started at a young age. So obviously like a 5-year-old, you're not the ones making that decision, but if you were getting started, how would you do it? And would you change anything maybe about, your story of how we did it?
I would just go out there and yard everyone. Just kidding. No, what I would do is, obviously, I would know. One thing that I would do is, now knowing how much goes into racing off the track, I would put in a lot more time learning how the car works, what I'm feeling behind the wheel, and then being able to tell that to my dad, and so he would know specifically what I need, and just understanding setup a lot more. So that way I could just be a lot faster. So I could know what's wrong, because back in the day I just drove the dang car. I didn't know what was going on.
100%.
So that's pretty much what I would do.
Yeah, I can agree, because that setup stuff helps make that progression and that progress, so much faster when you are driving a fast car.
Well, you can probably agree with this. Knowing once I learned and understood how a race car works, being behind the wheel of it is a lot better, because you know exactly what you're feeling and you know exactly what you're looking for to improve your speed.
Yeah, it helps you give better feedback, which I think as a driver is like one of the most crucial things. If you can't give good feedback to whoever's helping you, or give good feedback to yourself, if you're the one setting up the car, like what good is it? You don't know what's going on.
Right.
So for sure, yeah, at a younger age, that if you can pick that up sooner than kids, that's where you're going to start passing people, and that's where you're going to be, light years ahead. On the side also, though, of just like, getting started, karts, outlaw, or karts, I should say, micros or flat karts or anything like that.
Yeah.
I would just say if you are younger and you're wanting to get started, try to do some research on your area, like where you're from. Try to find out what's popular because unfortunately, outlaw karts, even though I would recommend them, they're not everywhere. There's not outlaw kart tracks everywhere. They're very sectional across the United States.
You're pretty fortunate to be close to a big class.
Oh, the fact, like I said, I was lucky to be a racer. I'm lucky that I grew up in Southern Oregon where we had racing, and we had racing also just a little bit south. I mean, there's a stretch where you could drive maybe 10 or 12 hours as far as, central and almost Southern California up here to central Oregon, maybe a little bit farther than 12 hours. But, in that region, where there's a good handful of outlaw kart tracks and, whatever exit you got to take off I-5, you can land at a couple of pretty neat places.
I'm pretty confident when I say, I guess you could say Salem doesn't really run too much anymore, but Roseburg to Lakeport,
even a little bit farther south with Chowchilla and Bakersfield.
But I was going to say that's pretty much the main field of tracks that you're seeing these NASCAR drivers come from. But now that we're seeing all these, a good amount of places in the Midwest, like Millbridge, places in Texas pop up, they're starting to produce some pretty stout racers.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of talent in outlaw karts. So I would say if I were to get started, outlaw karts if I could, but if flat karts popular in your area, get good at flat karts and figure out, what that pathway looks like. Or micros. I know that's really rising in the dirt track racing world. So micros, if that's where you live close, you got to get a junior sprint. That is the route you need to take.
And if you have a flat cart like on a road cart, and we've seen this at Red Bluff, Dominic Gordon, I believe, comes from the flat cart background.
Yeah.
On road.
A lot of them can transfer over because there's so many things to learn that actually help you in a cart because it's hard to be smooth. It's hard to hold the wheel in the right spot.
Right. So nothing's gonna. I guess you could say nothing's going to limit you in your progression.
Yeah.
Anything you can get into is gonna.
Yeah, it's more seat time, it's more experience, and like I said, I wouldn't change my story for anything because I think every little thing that happens, just like for a lot of people, that's what makes you into the racer that you are or puts you in the spot. Because if things were different, heck, like for example, we might not have never met, we might not have had the podcast, we might not have started a YouTube channel. Like you start looking at little things. If you analyze it, I'm happy with how our stories went. So moving on now to our second and final fan question. Tanner, I'm 16 years old, and am I too late to get started in racing? And also, if I don't have any financial help, how would I do it?
Yeah.
So I think what I would say to that, first off, you're never too late to get started in dirt track racing, ever. If you start young, there's obviously advantages to that. But also starting a little bit later, for example, Kyle Larson started when he was 7 years old.
Yeah.
Even if you're 8, 9, there are, I wouldn't necessarily say there's advantages. The later you start, obviously you're going to feel behind.
Yeah.
But no matter what, if you're starting at 16, that's a good time to go out there and get in a bigger car and kind of jump right into that.
I think that learning curve is cut down significantly when you're starting a little bit older because you understand, you're able to retain information and work on that a lot faster.
So in a way, there's advantages.
Right. And so one thing I also want to add to that is you're never too old to race because, you might start, let's say you're starting when you're 30, you might not have the best odds to make it into Cup, but if you're racing for the same reason everyone else is behind the wheel of a race car, it's to have fun.
Yeah.
And I don't care what I'm racing. If I'm at a racetrack on Saturday night with you or any friends or driving anything, I'm having fun. So if you want to have fun, just race. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, I agree. I know so many people, want to make it big time, want this glory, this fame, the money, whatever, whatever you do it for. But at the end of the day, we're just so blessed to be at a racetrack on a Friday, a Saturday night, or, if maybe even in, better situations, you're racing all the time. For example, we have a big schedule this year and we're super blessed to have that opportunity to chase that. So yeah, for sure. I think you're never too late, just what I would encourage real advice in the sense of, if you are 16, 17, you kind of have to do the same research as if you're younger.
Right.
You have to kind of figure out what's popular in your area, what's your local racetracks look like. And, that learning curve is going to be way slower because, are going to happen faster. And there's not going to be as much of a learning curve because you've been at the races. You're kind of more of a fan, hopefully. And if you're starting later, one thing I would encourage is really learn how to work on the cars. Maybe before you get started, get your name involved. Try to work with teams. Try to be a mud scraper. I know there are a lot of teams out there, especially on the local level, that don't have a lot of help. They would buy your pit pass every single weekend if you showed up there on time to help and learn how to put air in tires, mount stuff, wipe down the car with WD-40 or clean it and scrape mud after mud pack. Like, teams are really interested in getting people involved because unfortunately there isn't actually a lot of kids that are kind of wanting to take that side of things and be a crew guy at first and learn the ropes. So that's what I would really suggest.
Now, on the flip side of that, say you're 16, 17, you want to get into it. Now you don't have the funds. Well, the funds, that's an issue that's obviously a little bit harder because it's kind of out of your control.
Yeah.
But in today's day and age, I think it's a lot easier to be able to get funds. And I took this information from, he used to be the scale man at Red Bluff. His name's Tony. And he told me this one time. He told this to me and my dad, and he works at the local O'Reilly's by our house. And he told us this. He said, if you asked 100 people for $1 million, you're bound to get $1 million, right? And obviously that's not necessarily literal, but today's day and age, if you need funds, you got to go out and find them. I've asked so many people, been turned down by so many people, but there are the people that want to support me. They understand what I'm doing. They understand my background. They understand what I want to do. They follow my dream. You're bound to get some funds somewhere. And there's always people that, might be looking for tax write-offs. Learn the business side of things. And I think there's always potential to get money to fund your racing. I think you could agree.
I would agree. And it's tough. It's like, it's one of those things, it's like easier said than done. Like someone can, I could make a class or you could make a course, but like, it's really a hard thing to do. But like Bennett said, a lot of it just goes into like putting in that time and effort. And I think you just gotta try to be the best in that category as a racer. And I think a lot of racers don't. Not that I don't want to say that because I don't want to say that they don't. But, maybe that's an area that it's easy to get missed because it is difficult, to be presentable and be, kind of check all the boxes in that area. But I would say, like, really put time and effort on how to be presentable and how to be better than all the racers that you are, in a way, competing against for money, because there is maybe there's only so many companies that do want to support racing. You got to find them and whatnot. And then also, use if you do have connections, maybe your parents know
family,
a bit, family, friends, and then also, just circumstances, anything like that, try to take advantage of. I know if there's any females watching the podcast, I will say you have a good chance of getting sponsorship, because I've actually talked to a couple fans that were females that wanted to get started.
Because you're racing in a male-dominated sport.
Exactly. So, take advantage of those circumstances, but put as much time and effort into it. And then also, whatever your skills are that are good about your racing, I would say show off your, once you get started. Like, for example, we do the videos, but maybe you're not, maybe you don't want to be in front of a camera. Whatever you do in racing, maybe you're a good writer. Like, learn how to write articles about your racing, and that's how you promote your sponsors or that, or, a podcast or some sort of show, or even just GoPro footage, like little things that, are really enticing to sponsors and get them excited. And so I would say that, and also, one of the things that I'm really trying to work on is, like, once you do get sponsors, spend as much time as possible keeping them involved, because it's a lot easier to keep a sponsor than to go find a new one. So that would be my biggest advice. And like I said, easier said than done. And that's the one area of my career that I want to continue to get better at and try to be the best, because, man, there's so much opportunity.
Right. And I think the best way to sum it up for me to tell you is, if you put hard work and dedication, you get turned down a lot, it won't go unnoticed. And I think that's something that a lot of people, just keep going. Your hard work will go noticed sometime. It's not going to go unnoticed. So I think that's one thing we really want to excel at, and I think we're getting a lot better at it as well.
100%. Yeah, make connections, put that hard work, put that effort into it, and it's going to pay off eventually. There are a lot of people that want to support dirt track racers. So
you'll get your opportunity.
Absolutely. So that is going to kind of wrap up here, episode 16. Hopefully you enjoyed just Bennett and I, but really telling our stories. And it is cool. That's like something awesome about the podcast, like really sharing stuff that happened in our career, and you can break it down, because, man, I've been racing now. So if I started end of 2008 and now it's 2021, I mean, that's my whole life, pretty much just at the dirt track. And it's just crazy. All the people you meet, the connections that you make, and now the lifelong friendships. I don't know what I would have been doing for that time. I would have been pretty bored from 2008 to 2021 if I wasn't a racer.
Yeah, I'm going on 14, 15 years of racing. I don't even know at this point, but I can tell you one thing, the train ain't stopping.
Yeah.
It's going to keep on rolling.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's going to wrap up episode number 16. Let us know what your thoughts were in the comments section down below. If you guys want to, you can listen on Apple Podcast or Spotify if you love to listen to the audio version. We get a lot of cool comments over there and ratings. And then also here on the YouTube channel every single Wednesday at 3:30. I guess we'll see you guys all in episode 17 as we continue to roll into summer. And man, we have some exciting weeks ahead of us. So we will see you guys all in the next one. We are signing off for today.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, you are watching Off the Track, and it is time to drop the hammer.